Okay, so quadratic equations can be solved by the three methods that we've already talked about. Factoring, using the square root property, completing the square, which uses the square root property. But it's not always convenient to complete the square. Like you noticed that probably in the last video, a couple of those problems, you get into the fractions and it's a little bit trickier to work with and stuff. Well, you could solve all quadratic equations by completing the square. Somebody somewhere said, hey, let me come up with a formula so I don't have to keep completing the square every time. Okay, so take a basic quadratic equation. ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Now all quadratic equations can be written in that form. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you where the formula comes from. I'm going to derive the formula is what we say. And when my son was in college and he took college algebra, his teacher gave him extra credit if they could derive the quadratic formula, and he did it. So yeah, he teaches math at a high school. Okay, there's my quadratic formula. I get an x squared term, I get an x term, and I get a constant. And I can set it equal to 0. I don't know what a, b, and c are, but I know they're real numbers. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do it how we completed the square in the last problem. And so I'm going to put the constant on the other side. Now, you don't get to have that a there, so I'm going to divide everything by a. Okay. So I have x squared now plus b over ax, leaving a space, negative c over a. Now I have to find that magic number. So I take the b over a. Oops, that's supposed to be an a. I'm going to divide it by 2 or multiply by 1/2. We talked about that. So b over 2a. And then I'm going to square it. So I get b squared over 4a squared. Okay, that's what the magic number is. That's what I'm going to add to both sides. Plus b squared over 4a squared plus b squared over 4a squared. Okay, we're on our way now. Okay, so now we can factor the left. It's a perfect square trinomial. It's going to be x plus, remember you have to take the square root of that, or you can think about that in front before you squared it, right? Okay, so plus b over 2a, whole thing squared, equals. Now I want to get a common denominator over on the left, or on the right. So I'm going to multiply by 4a right there. So I get a common denominator. And I'm going to get negative 4ac over 4a squared plus b squared over 4a squared. Okay. So a little bit more work here. X plus b over 2a squared equals, now, yeah, I'll just write negative 4ac plus b squared over 4a squared. We'll fix that in a minute. Okay, now, all that work. Now you can take the square root of both sides. So you're taking the square root here, and you're taking the square root here. Don't forget the plus or minus. And so I get x, let me use the black pen, x plus b over 2a equals plus or minus. Now I'm going to do two things. One, I'm going to switch that around. So the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over. And now this bottom part here, I can take the square root of that. That's going to be 2a, which is convenient. Now I just have to do one more thing. I have to bring this term over to the other side. So I get x equals negative b over 2a plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. They have common denominators, so just one last step. And this is how we say it. X equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That is the quadratic formula. There's songs that help you remember it. There's a story to help you remember it. But that's the quadratic formula. So in the next videos, we'll show you how to use the quadratic formula.